And so, good morning, everyone. My name is Rachel, and I'll be your moderator. Today's webinar is sponsored by NatRoad's Platinum partner, Bridgestone. Firstly, let me introduce our guest speaker today, Alkan Munur. He's the Assistant Director at the Wage Inspectorate, Victoria. During this webinar, Alkan will be taking you through the rights and responsibilities of owner-drivers, hirers, and freight brokers under the new Victorian rules. Just before I hand over to Alkan to begin his presentation, may I quickly request that you put your microphones on silent to avoid any disturbance during the webinar. Like always, we'd love to hear from you during today's presentation. So if you have a question for Alkan, please feel free to type in your questions into the question and answers section at the bottom of your screen. You may send your questions in at any time during the presentation. We'll be answering questions at the end of the session. Okay, so without any further ado, I'd like to kick things off by welcoming Alkan. Alkan, over to you.
Thanks, Rachel. First of all, I'd like to thank National Roads for inviting us to this webinar. It's always nice to meet with our stakeholders and work closely together. So thank you for that. I'll continue by introducing the rest of my team. So a bit of background prior to that. It's basically, we started as the ODFC team back in September 2019. The team was founded then at the same time. So basically the guys in the team, our role was to create our compliance capabilities within the Wage Inspectorate Victoria. And that included understanding the ODFC Act prior to the changes, and also the changes that were implemented and took effect as of 1st of May 2020. The team has basically been busy in creating our internal policies, operational policies, our enforcement policies, and working closely with our stakeholders to actually understand how the industry works and understanding the different sectors within the industry. So first of all, I'd like to introduce our team leader, David Ledbetter.
Hi,
David has a background in investigations, intelligence work, and has been working for government for the last, say, 20 years. Dave, would you like to say a couple of words?
I just wanted to say hello, welcome to everyone. And as Alkan said, it's just a good opportunity for us to touch base with our stakeholders, and hopefully this will provide some clarity around some of the information around ODFC. So yeah, welcome.
And we have Nirupama Sivakumar. She is one of the authorised officers / investigators within the ODFC team. Nim, I'll hand it over to you.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, just want to welcome you guys as well. And I just encourage you guys to ask any questions if you need clarity over anything at the end of this.
And we have Nathan Steinkohler, who's also one of the investigators within the ODFC team. Nathan.
Hi guys, hi everyone. Thanks for coming, and yeah, great to speak to everyone, and feel free to ask any questions.
And we have Peter Ho, who is also one of our investigators within the ODFC team.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming, and thanks for having us today.
So as I've mentioned, the ODFC team started back in September 2019, and we're basically all new to the owner-drivers industry. So we've taken the time to really work with our stakeholders and understand the ins and outs of the industry and how it all works, and what the issues were prior to the changes, and how the changes to the Act will have an impact on the industry moving forward. So I'll give you a bit of a background around the Wage Inspectorate Victoria. Our role, apart from the regulating the owner-drivers and forestry contractors industry, we also have a few other streams of legislation that we look after. One would be the Long Service Leave Act, the other the Child Employment Act, and the new piece of legislation that we now have coverage over as of the 1st of July 2021 is the wage theft legislation. So the role of the Wage Inspectorate Victoria is to protect vulnerable workers, investigate deliberate exploitation and willful disregard of the law, and basically achieving compliance, I should say voluntary compliance in high risk industries, and help create a level playing field for businesses in Victoria. If you can see the slide, we have a specific email address for the ODFC Act, which is odfc@dpc.vic.gov.au. Now that email address is looked after the ODFC team. So any queries you guys have in relation to, you know, the obligations under the ODFC Act, or any concerns around how contracts are working, please feel free to flick us an email, and we'll respond to you as soon as possible. And we also have a info line, which is 1-800-287-287. So they're a dedicated team that answer calls in relation to all the pieces of legislation that we look after. Now, the Owner, Drivers and Forestry Contractors Act came into force on the 1st of May 2020. And a lot of the obligations, the changes to the Act came into force on the 1st of May 2020. A lot of the obligations were already there. However, under the changes, there were penalties that were attached to some of those obligations. So under the amended Act, people and businesses may face penalties if they fail to meet their obligations, and is our responsibility as a Wage Inspectorate Victoria to investigate and take enforcement action on these offences where they're detected. And the ODFC team is a dedicated team to ensure that we achieve compliance within the industry. Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, okay. So the Owner, Drivers and Forestry Contractors Act covers owner drivers that operate up to 3 vehicles to transport goods, not passengers. So we have received a few queries around owner drivers that are transporting passengers, such as, you know, your Uber, your DD, or your taxi drivers. But I just want to make it very clear, it's only covering the transportation of goods. It also covers haulage and harvesting contractors in forestry, and anyone hiring these drivers or contractors. So freight brokers also, they're covered under this Act, and also the tip truck drivers in the building and construction sector. And the Owner, Drivers and Forestry Contractors Code of Practice has guidance on how to comply with the Act. Now, although a lot of the penalties that have been included or added to the new Owner, Drivers and Forestry Contractors Act are not set out in the actual Code of Practice, enforcement action can still be taken on matters where there's been non-compliance with the Code of Practice as well. So the obligations in the Act prior to the changes were that the hirers of freight brokers that engage contractors for 30 days or more, or a total of at least 30 days within any 3-month period, must provide to the contractors the information booklet that applies to their industry, the rates and cost schedule that relates to their vehicle. Now, this information allows the contractors to better understand their operating costs, and can be found on the business.vic.gov.au/ODFC website. So the purpose of providing this information is basically giving the operators, the owner drivers, a better understanding of what the cost factors are in running their business, and be able to make a better decision when it comes to accepting contracts or rates and so forth. Now, these obligations were already in the Act. However, as of 1st of May 2020, any hirer or freight broker that does not provide this information 3 days prior to the engagement of the owner driver may face penalties. Now, contracts must also be in writing, where the hirer has engaged a owner driver for 30 days or more, or 30 days within a 3-month period. The contract should set out the guaranteed minimum hours of work or level of income, the rates to be paid, the minimum notice to end the contract or payment instead of notice. The contracts we refer to as model contracts, which is basically industry standard, and they can be found on the Business Vic website, in saying that we are currently reviewing the contracts and we'll be uploading the latest version shortly. So the contract that's actually on the Business Vic website, it may be a little outdated, however, still can be used, but we will be updating the website to provide a more up-to-date model contract with industry standards. Now, hirers, owner drivers and forestry contractors can appoint agents to negotiate contracts for them, and they can also conduct negotiations as a group when engaged by a single business. Payment and notice to end contracts. Generally, hirers must pay contractors invoices within 30 days of receiving them. And generally, if an ongoing engagement is for 30 days or more, hirers, owner drivers and forestry contractors must give enough notice that a contract is ending. Now, this is actually specified in the Act. So it's at least 3 months for forestry contractors and owner drivers of heavy vehicles and 1 month for all other owner drivers. Otherwise, if notice is not provided, the hirers must make payment instead of notice. Now, people must not be treated badly because they exercise their rights under the Act, and hirers must not disadvantage owner drivers and forestry contractors for raising health and safety issues or seeking to negotiate contracts. Now, if you look at the, or you may already be aware that under the Code of Practice, there's clauses that the hirers must be in line with, such as unconscionable conduct, and basically it sets out what is acceptable and what is not acceptable in negotiating contracts and engaging hirers, drivers and other contractors. So although there aren't any penalties attached to breaching certain sections of the Code of Practice, enforcement action can still be taken based on the findings of any investigation into allegations of breaches of the Code of Practice. And in relation to the information booklet that's required to be provided, there's a lot of information around health and safety issues as well. So it basically gives an understanding to the drivers around the costs involved, but also OH&S matters as well. So the reason why this information is provided as well, the information that we've received previously, is that some drivers have been accepting contracts where they didn't really have an understanding of what the actual cost may be in running their business, therefore having to work longer hours, more days of the week, therefore having an impact on their OH&S. So the information booklet provides some really good information around OH&S, what the standard rates are in the industry, but keep in mind that these are only a guide. We don't have the power to enforce what the rates are. So, the purpose of this is providing enough information for the driver to go into a negotiation or accept a contract prior to taking on the work and realizing that they have to work extra hours to make ends meet. How to handle disagreements. So the Victorian Small Business Commission can help to resolve disputes between hirers and contractors. Some of these disputes may arise as a result of pay disputes or unconscionable conduct, where the Wage Inspectorate Victoria may not have jurisdiction over. So any matters that do come to us where we don't have the power to investigate or take enforcement action, it may be the case where we can refer you to the Small Business Commission, where they can hear the dispute and make a decision on that. And in any event where the dispute cannot get resolved, the matter can also be referred to the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal. So the website's on the slide. But in any case, we're more than happy to take any queries through our ODFC email address or our front end info line, and we can assess it for you. And if need be, we can refer you to the Victorian Small Business Commission. Now, the Wage Inspectorate Victoria. So we are in the process of finalising our auditing program, and the way we'll be conducting our audits will either be desk-based audits, so contacting hirers or freight brokers, introducing ourselves and advising them that they've been selected for an audit, and then forwarding the auditing program to them via email or hard mail. We also may be conducting field inspections, so ad hoc audits in the field where we may just knock on the door and ask to conduct an audit with you guys. The powers we have under the ODFC Act is that we may require informational documents via formal notice, and we are able to enter premises with the occupier's consent. But in saying that, we will most likely contact you guys prior to any audit being conducted, and ensure that you guys are aware that will be attended. Now, our auditing program is more of an educational approach, and the aim is not to catch people out. The aim is to achieve voluntary compliance, and we have had a lot of queries around what type of penalties are involved in any breaches detected as a result of an audit, or is there a grace period for us to bring our affairs in order. But our approach is not to catch people out, like I've mentioned. It's more to work with you guys to educate the hirers and freight brokers around what the obligations are under the ODFC Act, and assist in putting measures in place to ensure that you are compliant moving forward, regardless of what the outcome may be of an audit or investigation. Our first approach is always to provide education. Now, in saying that, there may be scenarios where there's some willful disregard towards the Act, where a higher enforcement action may be taken. But in saying that, our initial approach is always to educate any hire or freight broker in meeting their obligations. Now, as a result of the pandemic, it's been pretty difficult on the industry. We understand that, and therefore we've delayed our auditing program. So originally we were supposed to start on the 1st of May 2020, but given the circumstances, we've decided to push that back for several reasons. One may be that a lot of the businesses operating in this industry were not able to operate. Therefore, our communications program may not have reached these businesses. But at the same time, we understand that the critical service you guys have been providing hasn't been impacted by the auditing program that we were to commence as of 1st of May. But in the first quarter of 2021, we will be changing our approach to auditing. And again, it'll still be an educational approach in ensuring voluntary compliance, but any serious non-compliance or willful disregard, then our enforcement actions may be escalated. Before I progress to areas that are out of our responsibility, I'll talk a bit about the enforcement strategies we have in place. Now, part of the changes to the Owner, Drivers and Forestry Contractors Act is that penalties have applied to certain obligations, and the enforcement actions that at our disposal may include a warning notice. So, for example, an audit's been conducted on a hirer for the first time, and we've detected several offences. Our first approach is to educate and provide a warning notice to give the opportunity for the hirer or the freight broker to rectify the issues discovered and put measures in place to ensure that any future audits do not disclose any breaches. The next step from a warning notice is a penalty notice. So rather than jumping straight to a litigation, we have the capability as part of this act to issue penalty notices. And the penalties for a body corporate, I believe, is 25 penalty units and 5 penalty units for any other operator. So in saying that as well, the penalties are usually 20% of the maximum penalty. So for a body corporate where it's 25 penalty units, 20% of that, I don't have the dollar figure with me right now, but we can touch base on that shortly. 20% of that will be the actual penalty infringement notice. Now, in any matter where we have some serious disregard for the act, litigation action may be taken where the maximum penalty may be sought. But again, I do want to reiterate that our focus is not to take heavy action against any breaches. We are always trying to work with our stakeholders and ensure voluntary compliance and provide education where we can. What we don't do is that some of the complaints that we have received so far out of our jurisdiction, and these complaints usually are in relation to remuneration disputes, unfair contract issues, property disputes, and failure to meet payment terms. So a lot of those can be helped by the Victorian Small Business Commission. But in any case, if you guys do have any questions around that, please feel free to contact us as your first point of call. And we're more than happy to guide you through the process and refer you to the Small Business Commission.
Okay, did you want me just to quickly back on the summary of offences and the penalty amounts? I can just give you those figures.
Yes, that'd be great, Dave.
So for an individual, currently that's $165.22. That's one penalty unit. And for body corporate, which is 5 penalty units, that would be $826.10, which is reviewed annually as well.
Okay, and the next review, I believe, is end of this financial year?
Correct.
Okay. Thanks for that, Dave.
Sure.
Okay, we're happy to take questions now, guys.
Yes, okay, so thank you, Alkan. We're going to begin answering some questions submitted during today's presentation. As a reminder to everyone, you can still submit questions through the questions section in your attendees control panel. Alkan, our first question is, what types of records do hirers or freight brokers have to keep to satisfy the obligations under the ODFC Act?
Thanks, Rach. That's a really good question. I'll pass it on to David.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. That's a very good question. So with records, the Act does require you to obviously provide a booklet or cost and rate schedule. So we would need to evidence that you've actually provided those documents. So however you've provided it, whether it's a hard copy or electronically, we would need to see some sort of record that you've kept, whether that's the email itself, whether you're keeping your own record keeping way of doing things, whether it's a booklet or spreadsheet or something like that. We don't prescribe to you what those records have to look like, as long as when we ask for it, we can basically have proof that you've provided the booklet and the rate schedule to the contractor. Hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, brilliant. The next question is, so this person has 2 trucks. They work in New South Wales but make deliveries to Victoria regularly across the border. Does this legislation affect their business?
I'll answer this one. So the legislation would apply to that person and to that business, so long as a substantial part of the services under the owner-driver's contract is performed in Victoria. If that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. So hopefully that answers that question. Okay, the next question. Must the owner-driver always drive one of the trucks to come under the legislation, or just some of the time?
I'll answer that. So under the legislation, it does provide that the owner-driver can have relief operators. So they do not have to be the sole driver for those vehicles, but they have to be the owner, and they would have to drive
Okay, brilliant. Okay, and next question. For the owner drivers who have employees, how successful do you think it has been allowing third parties to access information about employee license status and offences via application to VicRoads from a safety and compliance standpoint?
Hi, this is Nathan. I'm happy to answer that, but I'm going to have to take it on notice because I don't want to speculate about what that question's asking. Just yeah, but I'm happy to take that on notice.
Yep, not a problem. We'll get back to that. We'll email that person your answer if you can get that through after this. Okay, next question. What education is being given to hirers, or what investigations into hirers have you done?
So at this stage, we've commenced our communications program. So basically, we've conducted a mail out program to all the businesses that are registered under transport industry under Business Vic business register, which included links to certain aspects of the Act and the obligations. And further to that, we've distributed that communications program through to the Transport Industry Council and all the members to distribute through to their own members. And I believe National Roads have also received some of the communication there to go into the newsletter. Apart from that, the second phase of our education program is social media advertising campaigns, which has recently commenced as well, where not only educating hirers, but also the contractors as well, advising them of our existence and certain links and where to find information where they need. So I hope that has assisted. But in saying that as well, we're working very closely with a lot of our stakeholders and providing information education where possible. And we have an info line as well, where if any hirers or contractors have any questions, can always contact us if it's specific to their current circumstances or general information. We're more than happy to assist where we can.
Okay, thanks for that. And I think this is the last question. If the hirer is based in Victoria, does the ACT apply to contractors in other states? I think that might just be like ACT. I'm not sorry. I read it out as ACT because it's capitalized, but does the ACT apply to contractors in other states?
Nim?
Sorry, guys. Yeah, so just I think it's very similar to the question that was asked earlier on that I answered. But yes, if they're doing a significant amount of their work in Victoria, then it will apply to them.
Okay. And we've just had one more question really quickly come through. What if the owner driver is a company?
The Act still applies.
Okay. All right.
I guess, sorry, I'll just continue on with that as well. There's a lot of information that we need to take into account prior to deciding whether, the Act applies to certain circumstances. So generally speaking, it's more around looking at owner drivers that have 3 or less vehicles and are contracting out to hirers for the transportation of goods. So, in a scenario where you have a company versus a sole trader and a company is hiring employees to drive vehicles, that will not fit the definition of an owner driver as a contractor. So again, the information we're providing is very general at this stage. If you have any specific questions to your own circumstances, I suggest you send us an email and we can request further information where needed and provide you a more accurate answer around whether the Act does or does not apply to you. Because the last thing we want is to provide incorrect information during this webinar without having all the facts in front of us and leading you down the wrong track. So any questions around whether the Act does or does not apply to you, please flick us an email to our email address or give our info line a call, and we can provide you with more accurate information.
Okay, thank you for that. That was our last question. So thank you, Alkan and the team. And thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. If you do have any other questions, feel free to email us at info@natroad.com.au. Please note the webinar will be uploaded to the website and the recording will be sent to you via email. Once again, thank you for joining us today and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks
Thank
for
you,
having us,
everybody.
guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.